Hey there! Probably you're new to FPV and totally shocked by all the abbreviations and commonly said things in this hobby. In this video I will give you an explanation on 55 things which might cross your way when you start out with FPV. You will find chapters down below so you can jump to every point which is interesting for you. But enough of talking, let's go! AWG, American Wire Gauge, the thickness of cables. So here you can see a 14 AWG cable, and this one over here is a 22 AWG cable. When you're flying FPV, your quad will be on a dedicated video channel. This means channel in this hobby. BF stands for beta flight, binding. When we talk about binding, we want that our radio and our quad will bind together. CLI, command line interface. This is the command line in beta flight where you can copy and paste several commands and you don't have to use the UI of beta flight. CW and CCW stands for clockwise and counterclockwise. Today most of the motors can spin in both directions, but for propellers you need to know if they are spinning clockwise or counterclockwise. DFU or bootloader mode. This is the specific mode you have to put your flight controller in to flash firmware on it. ESC, electronic speed control. Basically you can say when you put throttle on your radio, the flight controller sends the signal to the ESC and the ESC tells the motor how fast they have to spin. F1, F3, F4, F7, H7 and whatsoever. Today commonly used is F4, F7 and H7, which stands for types of flight controllers. Failsafe. This is a mechanism to minimize damage to the quadrocopter or any objects nearby when something bad happens. And bad, for example, when you lose the control from the radio, typically you will just have it set that it drops out of the sky and falls to the ground without further input. FC stands for flight controller, so the brain of your drone. FW stands for firmware, so everything you would flash on a flight controller or on an ESC. GND stands for ground or also the negative in an electrical circuit. GPS stands for Global Positioning System. So within GPS module you can use your quadrocopter for functions like in DJI, return to home or something like that. GYRO. The GYRO stands for gyroscope. Basically that's a small chip in a flight controller which tells the drone how it is tilted or rolled or the position of the quad. LQ stands for link quality of a crossfire receiver. When you use crossfire in your system, then it will show you how good your link quality is. OSD, on-screen display. When you're flying a quadrocopter, there are several informations you want to get out of the drone. So like battery usage right at the moment or flight time or anything else. For that reason you will use an OSD. PDB, or also power distribution board. Back in the days you had such a board where all the ESCs, so you can see the ESCs over here, were linked with one PDB, so this power distribution board, and from that board all the energy goes to the flight controller and the ESCs. Nowadays you're using 4-in-1 ESC like this, where you have basically all motors connected and also the battery leads, which goes to the FC directly. PID, also PID, proportional, integral and derivative. Basically you can say you can adjust these three parameters to change the flight performance. The flight controller or also the gyro collects information and measures them, and the PID control tries to correct errors. So you have a set point and a measured point, and the PID control tries to pull the 2 points as close together as possible, theoretically spoken. Prop is the short form for propellers. When you're talking in the FPV hobby about rates, this is how fast the drone spins, rotates, flips. So you can toggle your rates, and the lower the rates are, the slower the rolls will be, or the flips, and the higher the rates are, the faster the flips will be. And talking about fast and slow, in this hobby commonly you would use about 400 degrees per second up to 1000 or more degrees a second. RSSI is basically the same like we have nowadays with link quality for crossfire, and it stands for Received Signal Strength Indication. So the higher the RSSI is, the better your link quality is. RX. This is the small device which receives the input which you give with your radio. But it could also be an RX pin on your flight controller. So this is a receiving pin on the flight controller. SA stands for Smart Audio, but as you might would think, this hasn't anything to do with audio, so you don't hear anything with Smart Audio. With Smart Audio you can change bands and channels of your video transmitter on the go through the OSD with your radio. Telemetry. So telemetry says you're sending signal to the flight controller and the flight controller sends signal back to you. For example, you can receive the voltage where your battery is at, or if your RSSI is good or bad. TX. Speaking about TX, it's the same with RX. Could be your transmitter, so your radio, but it could also be a pin on your flight controller. VCC or VBAT. When you see this pin on a flight controller, it means this is the unfiltered voltage directly coming from the battery. On the most flight controllers you will also 3 volt, 5 volt and maybe also 9 volt pins where the voltage of the battery is reduced. For example, when you put in a battery with 4 cells and 16.8 volts, only 3 volts are coming out. And with VBAT or VCC you will get the whole 16.8 volts out of this. VTX stands for video transmitter. So this is the piece in a quad which is sending the FPV feed to your goggles. XT30 or XT60. This stands for the most commonly used battery connectors in the FPV hobby. For example, this is an XT60 battery plug and this is an XT30 battery plug. 1S, 2S, 3S, 4S up to 6S. This stands for cells. So when you're flying FPV, you will have batteries with different cells. So for example, here you can see a 3-cell battery, so you can see, count 1, 2, 3 cells. Here you have a 4-cell battery, and over here 2 cells or 1 cell. And basically the more cells you have in a battery, the more voltage is in this battery. And for different quads with different weight, you will need to have different batteries. Diversity. When you have diversity on your goggles, this means your receiving module will decide which antenna to use, so the module will hop on the antenna with the best signal. Speaking about Jello means you will have shaky camera footage, like this. LiPo stands for lithium polymer batteries. This is commonly used in the FPV hobby. Lithium-ion batteries are mostly used for long range, not really for freestyle or racing quads. mAh or milliamp per hour. This is the measurement of the capacity of a battery. So the higher the milliampere hours are, the more capacity you will have on this battery and the longer you can fly. But on the downside, you can't put any battery on any quad, because the higher the mAhs are, the higher the weight of the battery is, and vice versa. Mode 1 and Mode 2. Most commonly, the most FPV pilots are using the left thumb for the throttle and the yaw, and the right thumb or hand for the pitch and roll. With Mode 1 you will have the opposite. RC can stand for 2 different things. On the one side, radio control, so your radio transmitter. On the other side, it can stand for the whole hobby as well, like radio controlled cars or radio controlled drones and so on. 3D mode. When you're flying in 3D mode, your idle position of the throttle stick will be at the center. With the normal flying quad, you will have it from the bottom to the top end, and in 3D mode, you have it from the center to the top end and from the center to the bottom, which means when you're giving throttle from the center up, your drone will raise, but if you're putting it down below center, your drone will go in the negative direction. This means you will have throttle downwards. Why would you fly 3D? Because you can spin your quad the whole way around and flying upwards while going downwards on the throttle. Acro stands for acrobatic. As an FPV pilot, you're flying most of the things acro. Means when you're flying an acro and pitch forward, for example, it will stay forward pitched until you pitch back. Angle mode, or also level mode, is when you're flying a drone and it levels automatically. So you tilt your quad and as soon as you let go, it will tilt back. And same goes for pitching forward. As soon as you let go on your radio, it will pitch back. And in level mode, you can't do any flips or rolls like you would on a typical FPV quad. And in horizon mode, you can do flips and rolls, but as soon as you let go from the stick, it will center automatically. And same goes for flips. It will go in the horizontal as soon as you let go of the stick. RTF stands for ready to fly. In most cases, these are set which are sold with the goggles, with the batteries, with the radio, with the drone, so with everything you need to go out and fly. BNF stands for bind and fly. With the BNF drone, you will get a drone only. You won't get the goggles and you don't get a radio with that set. As soon as the quad arrives, you can bind it to your radio. AUW stands for all up weight. This means the weight of the quad and also everything which is carried by the quad, like a GoPro or battery. Dry weight is only the weight of your quad without battery or GoPro. FOV stands for field of view. So the wider the field of view is, the more you will see in the camera, and vice versa. FPV stands for first person view, and probably as you're watching this video you know this already. So you have the view of the drone you're flying with, as if you would sit in the cockpit of the drone. When you're talking about a locked in quad, this means that your quad is behaving like it's sitting on rails and you have the full control of the quad. LOS stands for line of sight. So in FPV flying you won't see much LOS, but for testing or test hovers, or if you want to check something before you put your goggles on, then you will fly line of sight to check if everything is working. PAL and NTSC. These are video formats which are used in different locations of the world. So in America you will see PAL more, and in Germany or in Europe you will see NTSC more. Nowadays you can use both, but most pilots stick to the standard which is in their country specific. Punch out means when you give full throttle and fly vertically into the sky. Quad. Quad stands for quadrocopter and it's the short form for that. RTH stands for return to home. So when your quad has GPS on board, you can use the return to home function to go back to your starting point. For example, when a failsafe occurs. UAV stands for unmanned aerial vehicle. So a drone without a human pilot on board. ARTF stands for almost ready to fly. So in most cases you will get everything in a quad except for a receiver and a radio. If I didn't help you with this summary, don't tell anybody how you spent the last minutes. But if I helped you, I'm happy if you leave a like and a sub. So, see you next time. Received signal strength for received signal strength. Strength.